Today, we are going to focus on aggregate demand or aggregate expenditure. At this point, we are still treating the word aggregate expenditure, aggregate demand interchangeably. We're still treating them the same. Later on, we will start talking about the slight difference between aggregate expenditure and aggregate demand. So our focus this week is the determinants of aggregate demand or aggregate expenditure. First, let's go back to look at the components of aggregate demand. So let's review four major components of aggregate demand, namely consumption, government purchases, investment, and net exports. So we learned that aggregate demand is made up of all four components. That means if there's any factor that affects either one of these components, then we should expect aggregate demand to be affected. So what we're going to do is to study the determinants of each one of these components, okay, so that we will learn the factors or the determinants of aggregate demand. We will first start with consumption. One of the key determinants of consumption is obviously income. Specifically, the most relevant measure of income to consumption is disposable income. As you recall what disposable income is, we talked about that in the beginning of the semester. So that is the amount of income that we have at our disposal after all the deductions have been made, after all the taxes have been paid, including our personal income tax. So comes April when we file the tax return. So what is left is our disposable income. So that dictates how much we can afford to spend. So disposable income, for now, let's just use the notation Y sub T. Let's denote disposable income as Y sub T. So disposable income is simply the consumption and the saving, the sum of consumption and saving. Because what is not spent is obviously saved. Before we go into other determinants of of consumption, we are going to dig a little bit deeper into the relationship between income, disposable income, and consumption. So let's introduce ourselves to marginal propensity to consume. Marginal propensity to consume is the fraction of each additional dollar of disposable income consumed. Marginal propensity to save, shorthanded as MPS, is a fraction of each additional dollar of disposable income saved. So if I have one extra dollar of income in my pocket and I tend to spend 80 cents of it, what that means is my marginal propensity to consume is 0.8. So because I've spent 80 cents of my extra income, that means I saved 20 cents of it. So my marginal propensity to save is 0.2 or 20%. So when we look at the formula, marginal propensity to consume is simply the change in consumption. By the way, triangle in math is usually used to denote change. So marginal propensity to consume is equal to the change in consumption divided by the change in disposable income. Marginal propensity to save, on the other hand, is a change in saving divided by the change in disposable income. What is noteworthy is the sum of these two has to be equal to 1 because what is not saved is spent, and vice versa. In other words, you can use this equation to derive the relationship between marginal propensity to consume and marginal propensity to save. For example, if you're given marginal propensity to save, you can easily find marginal propensity to consume by subtracting marginal propensity to save from 1. So let's do a very short exercise. In this exercise, we are given the disposable income. We're given different levels of disposable income, and we are given the corresponding consumption. So when the income is 0, consumption is $50. When the disposable income is $100, the consumption is $125, and so on and so forth. Why don't we take a couple of minutes to look at this data and see whether you can find a consistent pattern that will help you find the marginal propensity to consume. So let's pause for a couple of minutes. So let's come back. I hope you have taken a couple of minutes to look at the data and try to find the marginal propensity to consume. So many of you probably would notice that there is actually a consistent pattern. For every $100 increase in disposable income, you can see that consumption increases by $75. And this is consistent throughout the data. See, another $100 increase in consumption. Once again, you find $75 increase in every $100 increase in disposable income, you find another $75 increase in consumption. So what that means is when you calculate the marginal propensity to consume, that's 75, which is the change in consumption, divided by the change in disposable income. Be very careful here. We are using the change, not the level of consumption and disposable income. Okay? So you find that the marginal propensity to consume is 0.75. If you want to find marginal propensity to save, then you can make use of the relationship between these two variables. So 1 minus MPC is equal to marginal propensity to save. So that will give us, here we go, 0.25. Marginal propensity to save in this case is 0.25. So let's go back to the table a little bit. When you look at the first row, you can see that even if the disposable income is 0, the consumption is still at $50. Why do you think that's the case? How does that happen? Some of you may have thought of other reasons, other sources of consumption. For example, some people don't have income, they don't work, but they have inherited some money from their parents or grandparents. Some of them have worked before, so they have saved up, so they have accumulated their wealth. And many of us probably can make use of loans, credits. Okay, these days, probably credit cards. Or we can borrow some money from banks or from our family members, friends. Okay? So either way, that means there are other factors other than the income itself that can affect consumption. So in other words, we now turn to other determinants of consumption. These are the factors that are not dependent on income. They are non-income determinants of consumption. And they can contribute to what we call the autonomous consumption. Autonomous consumption is the amount of consumption that is not dependent on income. For example, expectations of future income. So not only that the current income has impact on our spending behavior, our spending on consumers, goods and services, our future income, or rather our expectations of future income, can affect how much we spend. So take, for example, let's suppose that you have a semester to go. You have one more semester to go. You're graduating, okay? And you have gotten a good job offer that pays pretty well. But obviously, you won't start working until you have graduated, so one more semester. So your current income doesn't your current income doesn't change, but you may have adjusted your expectations of your future income. So what is going to happen? Are you going to splurge a little bit? Buying some new clothes? Obviously, that's a good excuse, right? And you need clothes for your job, right? Or some of you may want to buy a new car. Once again, it may be a good excuse. You need a new car for your job. Okay? Some of you may start going out to restaurants more. Okay? So to tell you a true story, when I was graduating, so in our field, we look for a job more than a year before we graduated. So that's what I did. So I looked for a job more than a year before I graduated. I got a job offer about a year before I graduated. So did my colleague. So my colleague did the same. She also got a job about a year before she graduated. Both of us share something in common. Both of us love eating. We love food. Okay? So once she got the job offer, I mean, we were still poor students. We got, $1,000 stipend for the whole month. And then, but once we got the job offer, she started to eat out 3 meals a day. I mean, we're talking about the Midwest here, so we're not really talking about fancy, super fancy restaurants in New York City. But I mean, it's good restaurants. There are some good restaurants out there. So she started to go out to eat 3 meals a day. So by the time that she graduated, she had accumulated, more than $10,000 of credit card loans on dining only. I mean, obviously, I'm not encouraging that kind of behavior, but I'm just saying that, this is true, that, even though, we remain very poor students, but our behavior changed simply because we expected our future income to go up sharply. Okay? So That is one factor that can affect consumption. Another determinant of consumption is wealth. Okay? So the more wealthier we become, the wealthier we become, the more we are likely to spend. So if you win a lottery, obviously you're going to spend more. Credit means how easy it is to get loaned. If it is easy to get loaned, then we are likely to spend more. For example, if you get offers like zero down payment, zero interest rate for 12 months for a washing machine, obviously you are tempted to buy a new washing machine. Okay? So if you're given easy credit to easy financing to get a new car, obviously you are tempted to get a new car, to buy a new car. So that's easy credit, or how easy it is to get loans, get financing. And then we have income taxes. So if the government says that, well, we're going to lower the income tax, then obviously this is going to mean that we're going to take home more income, we're going to spend more. Transfer payment works almost the same as income tax. If we have a rise in transfer payment, if the government increases unemployment benefit, for example, consumer households are likely to spend more. And then the last one is the price level. So if the price level comes down, what that means is the purchasing power goes up in general. So we are going to be able to enjoy more consumer goods, more consumption in real terms. So those are some of the determinants, some of the non-income determinants of consumption, and they contribute to autonomous consumption. Okay? So I'm sure there is a longer list than what we have here, but in this classroom, we are going to focus on these determinants.